Okay, so now fast forward to now, you're run an advisory service. So what is your angle and edge?
Um, Two edges really. One, I put an awful lot of time and effort into what I do, and secondly, as well as hard work, you have to have a method as well as putting all the hours in, and sectional timings are very much part of my success and has been for over 15, 16 years now.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your sectional timings? That seems to be a bit of a theme recently with people I've been speaking to. How did you get involved with that?
Well, I say it's about 15, 16 years ago now, and Mark Holder was using them successfully for hurdle racing, and he rang me up and he said, look, I got something that's going to completely change your punting. He said, I want you to try these sectional timing methods. He'd obviously, say, done them on hurdles. He wasn't sure, I don't think at the time, whether they'd work over fences, but if anything, I think they're probably better or more reliable over fences. Horses tend to go more of an even gallop because of the nature of the jumping, and there's more obstacles per every mile over fences than hurdles. So I started, I remember there was one particular race at Exeter, and there was a horse called Backbeat. It got beaten about 20, 25 lengths. My horse called Ashley House, who was pretty useful. It was turned out again 2 or 3 weeks later. And I remember speaking to Mark and saying, look, I got this horse. I said, but it looks to be very, very well handicapped on what he did at Exeter last time. I said, the only problem though, is that it was beaten 20, 25 lengths. Will that stack up? He said, oh, don't worry about that. If the figures say he's performed to that level, he's performed to that level. And sure as eggs are eggs, it went and won. And that was a eureka moment, very much so.
So how many hours work does go into each day's betting then?
It depends on how many meetings a day, but if on one particular meeting, for example, you probably spend 2-3 hours analysing that. Cause I only concentrate on the steeple chases, so on an average card we perhaps have 3 chases. So that'd take me a couple of hours, and then an hour or so to analyse the figures at the end of the day. So if you've got a busy Saturday, that can add up.
Okay, so why did you make the decision just to concentrate on chases to begin with?
I think it was because I had very much a like for point-to-point in 100 chases from an early stage, and it developed into there. And also my own punting, when I was starting off, tended to have a lot more success with the chasers and the hurdlers for whatever reason, so it just seemed a natural progression. And I was always very keen not to overstretch. I think it's important to specialise in one thing or another. And I think the chasers probably interests me a bit more as well.
Okay, so how would you get up in the morning, how do you approach each day's racing? What is your modus operandi?
Well, I'd start by looking at the more competitive chase races on the day. So if we got 3 meetings, there might be 3 or 4 10-runner or more handicap chases. So they would be, that would be my my starting point, and look at those, go through, analyse each horse using my own ratings, which I derive from sectional timings. And having then just gone through the form using all the other vital criteria, trainer form, go in, trip, track, and all the rest of it, will then sort of do my own tissue. And then if I feel there's a mistake made, i.e. there's this horse at a lot bigger price available than the price I perceive its chance to be, then I'll advise it to clients as a bet.
Okay, what about form books and stuff? What sort of tool, do you use any specific tools or ratings yourself?
I don't use any other ratings, but I use Raceform Interactive for all the form. I find that very, very good, very easy to use. In the old days it was all manual, but I've been using that now for probably at least the last sort of 10, 12 years. Okay,
so do you used to sort of, obviously if you're still mates with Marco and people, do you collaborate with other pro punters to come up with your selections?
No, not at all, no. Mark, as you know, specialises in hurdlers, and I specialise in the chasers. But I'll still speak to him, and we take his advice here and there. But no, we wouldn't collaborate for any actual bets. So no.
And have you got anybody that occasionally rings up a mole in a yard that would say, this one today. Would you take any heed of anything like that from anyone?
No. If someone comes up in one year out the other, you learn the hard way that a lot of inside information is absolute rubbish.
What would you've crunched all the figures, you've done your form. Is there like a criteria for a bet? Do you see something you think, right, that's a bet, that's a bet? Have you got a formula for that sort of thing?
It's an analytical formula, really. Once I've priced up every horse in the race to the best of my ability, it's all down to figures then. And for me to send it out, I'm quite selective with the bets I give clients. A lot of my clients have been with me since I worked with Mark Holder back in 2004. 2 or 3 even before that, and they're not £10 punters. These guys look at it as a long-term investment. They're having serious money on, so I can't be asking them, even if I could find the bets, it'd be difficult to ask them to go and have 4 or 5 bets a day. They're looking for guaranteed value, horses that are substantially overpriced, and on average I find maybe a couple of those a week. But as well as that, for those who want more action, I will also, on a daily preview line, highlight other sort of positives and negatives on the cards for people who want to have more than maybe a couple of bets a week.
Isn't that a little bit counterproductive? Sometimes you think, you get 2 or 3 of those wins and your nap doesn't you? Is that not,
it
annoy the punters as well?
It can do, absolutely. But I think if you look at it analytically and just from the maths point of view, it takes the emotion out of it. So, if you say, right, horse A, I'm happy to back at 5 to 1. For small stakes, 6.5, 7 to 1. I'm happy to. There's enough of an edge then to send it out to the clients. And I think if you stick with that criteria, you're not going to go too far wrong, providing your methods are correct in the first place.
Right, one of the things that interests me from what you talked about, you say you price up a race, and then you, depending on the value that you can see there, you sort of act on it and offer your client. That's quite a skill to have, to be able to price up a race accurately and to actually do it better than the bookmakers that you're sort of competing against. So where did you learn that skill?
Well, it's just something that's I've learned to improve as time goes on, really. But it's something I've started off with a long time ago, and I think as long as you've got confidence in the work you're putting in, and the belief that your prices are right, then it's a big, it's an important tool to have in your armoury.
Okay, so where do you start pricing up a race? Do you start with the favourite, or do you, what makes you think something is a 2 to 1 chance?
Right, well, first thing I would do is to try and rule out a couple of the horses. If you've got a 12-runner race, it might not take too long to rule 3 or 4 out, and you're happy to price them up at 100 to 1 or 50 to 1 or whatever. I'll then try and put them in some sort of order, who I think has got the best chance down to who's got the least chance of winning, and it just becomes a knack of knowing how much better you think horse A is over horse B, and then the figures just sort of follow on from that. Really, it's just something that comes with practice.
Okay, so when you've sorted out your bets for your clients, do you back them yourself as well?
Yes, I do. I back all the account bets that I send out, as I say, on average a couple a week. And I'd back quite a few of the horses that I put up as preferences as well, depending on what price they are, later on in the afternoon. Okay,
so how serious a punter are you? You'd have to tell us how much, with stake-wise.
Not as big now as I was when I started out. I think when you start out, you've got no responsibilities. I could cope with the big highs and the big lows in those days, but when you bring up a young family, I've got 3 boys. There's enough pressure making the advisory service successful without the added pressure of betting very heavily, because we all know you're going to have losing runs as well as the winning runs. And whilst I remember back in 2002 I had a particularly good year punting, I also know there were 1 or 2 very bad months during that year, so I found it more and more difficult to cope with that. As I say, as I went on, with having the responsibility of bringing up a young family.
Okay, is the fact that a large group of people, your customers, are all trying to get on at the same horse at the same time a bit counterproductive? Do you see a collapse in the price, or does it not affect the market that badly?
It used to years ago, it used to have a dramatic effect. Now, not so much so. You will look if you phone in sort of an hour after the message goes out, you expect to take a point below the advised price. But generally nowadays, it tends to hold up pretty well.
Okay, so what percentage of your income is winning bets, and what percentage would be subscriptions?
Well, the lion's share very much with subscriptions. You know, as I say, I found it more and more difficult to put as much emphasis on my punting. And I made a conscious decision at that time that I wanted to be successful when I set out with my advisory service. I didn't want it to be, you know, a 5-minute wonder. I wanted longevity, and I think the only way you're going to achieve that is, you know, by giving that your absolute 100% concentration. There's been many a good punter, even plenty of bookmakers who've tried to succeed with running an advisory service and haven't. It's not easy, and I think you can perhaps do one or the other. I think it's very difficult to do both. And for now, I'm more than happy to sort of push Optimum Racing forward, keep growing the business, and you know, building that. Who knows? You know, down the line, I might well want to go back, you know, punting and make that my main sort of source of income. It's not something I'd rule out, but at the moment, I'm happy the way things are.
Now, the pressure on a punter to win that's got a job is quite high. The pressure on a punter that's doing it for a living is extremely high. I imagine the pressure on it, if you're tipping them to other people, is even higher, and then you've got 3 kids and a wife. So how do you cope with that pressure?
Well, that's a good question. Again, I think you learn to grow thick skin as far as that's concerned, but you have to have 100% confidence in your own ability. I know how hard I work at what I do. I'm not saying, you know, we're the most successful service out there, but there wouldn't be many that work harder than I do at it. And if I put the hours in and show the commitment that I do, then, you know, win, lose or draw, at the end of the day, I can sleep well.
Okay, so what would be, talk about sleeping well, what would be the worst losing run that you've suffered as a paid tipster, client tips that you've given out?
Blimey. I've been going 20 odd years now, mind Simon, so there's been, you know, probably been a few, but the way I bet, as I say, we are selective, looking at a couple of bets a week. We play with the odds very much in our favour, do a fair bit of each way betting. There hasn't been many disasters, if any. I've gone double figures without a winner on 1 or 2 occasions, but nothing dramatic, touch wood.
Okay, so you've never been on the verge of turning it all in, thinking I've gone at the game?
No. There's been a fair few lows. You know, there's times you think, oh, why am I doing this? But even when it's not going right, you know, I love the sport so much, and you know, I feel very privileged that I've turned a hobby and a lifelong passion into a living. That even when things aren't going well, you know, there's nothing else I'd rather be doing. I certainly wouldn't want to be back in one of my sales jobs.
The trouble is with a lot of punters, especially probably ones that are a bit new to the game, they see you charge an X amount of money for tips, and they expect them all to win. Now, have you had abuse from punters, and have you had any that you said, look mate, you might as well just turn this in yourself because you haven't got the temperament for it? Is any much of that?
Yeah, over the years there's been a fair bit of that. Thankfully things have calmed down a lot lately. I think I've got an understanding clientele base now who realise it is all about the long term. It's not about the short term. You know, you're going to have a couple of losing weeks, but it's irrelevant if, you know, the next 3 or 4 weeks, you know, make decent profits. And so yeah, over the years we've attracted the odd I don't know what the right word is, but people's expectations are sometimes just far too high. And like you say, they pay good money. They expect every tip to win. It's never going to be like that. But yeah, you just have to, you know, to take them with a pinch of salt. Really, they're always going to be about. But thankfully, things seem to have calmed down lately.
And do you take time to advise customers on staking? Because probably the most important thing of all is staking, really.
Yeah, I use a staking plan, and I'm always more than happy to speak on the phone to people who often get asked how they should stake things, and more than happy to give my advice on that. And I think we touched on it before. It's important to sort of gradually increase your stake. One of the worst things that can happen is they join me, we have a very good month, they might win 20, 30 points in a month, and all of a sudden they think they found the golden goose that lays the golden egg, and multiply their stake in by 5 or 10, and then the inevitable losing run follows somewhere down the line, and you don't hear from them again.